Hello, I'm Evely and I will tell you one story, let's go. Then was only 10 when he first sensed that something was terribly amiss in his home. The old mansion, perched at the edge of a forgotten town, had always been a place of secrets and shadows. But as the days grew shorter and the autumn chill crept in, Ethan began to notice that his family's smiles were no longer warm and genuine. Instead, each night, as darkness settled over the creaking halls, he was met with an eerie, lifeless grin, a smile as empty as the silence that followed. It all began on a stormy evening. The wind howled like a mournful specter outside his window and rain battered the ancient stones of the mansion. As Ethan lay in his narrow bed, sleep evading him, he heard a soft rustling at the foot of his bed. In the dim glow of moonlight filtering through threadbare curtains, he saw them, his family standing silently, their eyes devoid of life, their smiles unnaturally fixed in place. In that frozen moment, terror clutched his heart as he stared, unable to tear his eyes away from those vacant expressions. Over the following nights, the disturbing visitation became a relentless ritual. Just as the clock struck midnight, pale, almost translucent figures appeared, ghostly versions of the loved ones he once knew. Their expressions were blank, their eyes empty pools reflecting nothing but an eerie resignation. In the quiet hours, shivering under a thin blanket, Ethan's mind raced with questions he dared not voice. Had his family been replaced by impostors? And if so, what dark force could orchestrate such an unspeakable betrayal? Desperate for answers, Ethan ventured into the forbidden depths of the mansion. In the dusty attic, filled with relics of a bygone era, he uncovered a trove of forgotten photographs and brittle letters. One faded photograph, in particular, seized his attention, a family portrait where genuine warmth and affection radiated from every face, a stark contrast to the cold, lifeless visages now haunting his nights. Hidden within the yellowed pages of an ancient diary, he discovered a single, cryptic word scrawled in trembling ink: switched. The word echoed in his mind like a death knell, hinting at a truth too dreadful to comprehend. The diary spoke of a long-forgotten ritual, a desperate attempt to stave off a malevolent curse, and suggested that the family he remembered had been forcefully replaced by entities wearing their faces like masks. Then, one night, as thunder rolled across a tumultuous sky and lightning seared the darkness, reality and nightmare merged. Ethan awoke to the sound of deliberate, measured footsteps outside his door. Driven by a mixture of dread and a desperate need for truth, he crept along the shadowed corridor. The mansion's walls seemed to whisper with voices of the past, urging him to remember who he truly was. At the end of a narrow hallway in a long-forgotten room, he discovered a hidden compartment behind a pile of dusty crates. Inside lay a letter addressed to him, a confession penned by a desperate soul. The letter revealed a horrifying secret. On a night marked by tragedy, a curse had been unleashed upon his family, severing the bonds of true kinship and replacing them with counterfeit existences. His real family had been stolen away, and in their place, these hollow figures had taken root, doomed to watch over him with unyielding, lifeless smiles. The revelation shattered Ethan's fragile world. By the flickering candlelight, as he read the desperate words of that long-hidden letter, an icy dread seeped into his bones. The mansion, once a sanctuary, had become a prison of dark memories and lurking terror. Every creak of the floorboard and every whisper of the wind conspired to erode the last vestiges of hope. In his dreams, he caught fleeting glimpses of his true family, a gentle touch, a loving gaze, but these visions were cruelly snatched away by the overwhelming force of the curse. Night after night, the cycle of horror repeated, each encounter with the switched figures deepening the mystery and intensifying his isolation. In that bleak, suffocating silence, as the storm outside raged with a fury that mirrored his inner turmoil, Ethan made a solemn vow: he would unravel the mystery of the curse, no matter the cost, and reclaim the family that was rightfully his. With trembling resolve, he stepped back toward his room, the oppressive weight of the mansion's secrets pressing in on all sides. The lifeless smiles of his imposter family burned into his memory, a constant reminder that every midnight, when darkness fell, the nightmare would return. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the gloom, Ethan clung to a fragile hope that somewhere, beneath layers of deceit and despair, lay the key to freeing not only his true family but also his own soul from the clutches of a nightmare that refused to end. Ethan's resolve, though fragile, burned like a lone candle against the suffocating darkness that had long enshrouded the mansion. In the oppressive silence of that cursed night, he stepped from the remnants of his shattered room into a labyrinth of decaying corridors, each step echoing like the beat of a heart in a mausoleum. The mansion itself now seemed to writhe with a malignant life, its walls pulsing as if breathing, its very architecture contorting in unnatural ways. Shadows danced in the corners of his vision, forming shapes that were almost human yet impossibly twisted, figures that seemed to mock him with the memory of happier times. Driven by an instinct that both terrified and propelled him, Ethan followed a series of whispered voices that led him to a long-forgotten library concealed behind a faded tapestry. Dust motes swirled in the narrow beams of moonlight piercing through cracked windows, revealing towering shelves laden with ancient tomes and forbidden lore. In the center of the room, atop a pedestal carved with eldritch symbols, lay a weathered grimoire bound in cracked leather. Its pages, yellowed by time, recounted the dark ritual that had twisted his family into hollow doppelgangers, an incantation to siphon the warmth of life and replace it with a counterfeit semblance of love. Each line of archaic script seethed with an energy that made Ethan's skin crawl as if the very words were a living poison. With trembling hands, he deciphered the passages that hinted at a salvation, a way to reclaim the souls stolen from him. The text spoke of a hidden chamber deep within the mansion, a sanctum where the barrier between the living and the spectral was at its weakest. To break the curse, Ethan would need to enact a counter-ritual, one that demanded not only his unwavering courage but also a sacrifice of something dear. As thunder growled in the distance, the pages warned him that the price of restoring his true family might be his very innocence. Resolute, Ethan retraced his steps through twisting corridors until he reached a narrow, unmarked door behind a row of sagging portraits. With a creak that resonated like a death knell, the door swung open into a vast, cavernous hall lit by a spectral luminescence. In the center of this chamber, encircled by symbols etched into cold stone, lay an ancient altar. The air here was dense, heavy with the mingled scent of damp earth and decay. As he approached, the temperature plummeted and the ghostly visages of his impostor family began to emerge from the walls, each one wearing that same eerie, lifeless smile that had haunted his nights. Their eyes, now burning with a cold, unfeeling light, fixed upon him with an intensity that felt both accusatory and mournful. They moved in unison, their silent advance a macabre dance choreographed by the curse itself. Ethan's heart pounded as he took his place before the altar, clenching the grimoire to his chest. His voice, though quivering, began the incantation as prescribed by the ancient text. The syllables, foreign and guttural, echoed off the stone walls, weaving a tapestry of sound that resonated deep within the mansion's very soul. Almost immediately, the room convulsed. The floor beneath Ethan trembled and split open, revealing a yawning chasm lined with pulsating, runic symbols. From the abyss, spectral hands clawed their way upward, reaching desperately for the light that had been snuffed out long ago. In that dreadful moment, the apparitions of his true family materialized, flickering, sorrowful images that pleaded silently for release. Their faces, a blend of anguish and hope, were a stark contrast to the soulless visages now circling him. It was as if time itself had fractured and the mansion was a nexus where the past and present collided in a maelstrom of lost love and forgotten horrors. The impostor figures began to wail in a soundless chorus, a cacophony of despair that merged with the howling wind and the relentless pounding of Ethan's heart. A cold, malevolent force surged through the chamber, coalescing into a single, monstrous entity that emerged from the deepest recesses of the broken floor. This demon, its form a grotesque fusion of shadow and sorrow, glowered at Ethan with eyes that burned like molten coals. "Child," it intoned in a voice that reverberated like the toll of a funeral bell, "you dare challenge the fate that binds you? Your family, your memories, are mine to command." For a heartbeat, terror gripped him. Yet, within that terror, a spark of defiance flared. With his voice trembling but resolute, Ethan continued the incantation. Each word he uttered carved away at the malignant power of the demon, the very air around him shimmering with the force of his determination. The chamber's oppressive darkness began to fracture as bursts of light erupted from the altar, mingling with the spectral glow of his true family. The demon's roar grew louder, a soundless fury that vibrated through the stone, but with every syllable its form wavered. The final crescendo of the ritual came as a blinding radiance enveloped the chamber. The demon shrieked, a sound that seemed to split the night and disintegrated into a swarm of shadowy fragments that dissipated into nothingness. Slowly, the oppressive weight that had choked the mansion lifted. The lifeless smiles that had tormented Ethan for so long dissolved into expressions of profound sorrow and regret. His impostor family, freed from the demonic tether, faded like mist under the morning sun, leaving behind only echoes of a tragic past. In the ensuing silence, as the first tentative rays of dawn filtered through shattered windows, Ethan felt an overwhelming mixture of relief and despair. His true family, lost to the curse yet finally set free, had been restored, if only in spirit. The mansion, though scarred by the darkness that had once ruled it, now stood as a somber monument to the price of forbidden power. Every creak of its ancient bones and every whisper of wind in its corridors bore the weight of secrets too terrible to forget. Ethan stepped away from the altar, his eyes lingering on the faded remnants of those ghostly smiles. Though the curse was broken, the scars of that night would forever etch themselves into his memory. With each cautious step toward the mansion's crumbling exit, he carried the bittersweet knowledge that while the nightmare had ended, the realm of shadows still lurked at the edges of his vision, a silent reminder that some horrors can never be wholly banished. In the years that followed, whispers of the haunted mansion spread far and wide. Some claimed that on stormy nights, the echo of an ancient incantation could still be heard, a spectral lullaby for a family once lost and then found. And sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, a solitary figure could be seen wandering the ruined halls, his eyes reflecting both the terror and the hope of a life forever intertwined with the supernatural. The mansion had become a living legend, a dark fable warning that the boundary between the living and the dead, between truth and nightmare, is far thinner than we dare imagine. Thank you very much and see you all in the next video.